Welcome, my name is Olivia. I did a mini rebranding, so I was formerly the carnivore ballerina, and now I'm just Olivia. Anyways, today I'm going to be sharing my note-taking, which has been the probably biggest thing that has improved my ballet technique, as weird as that may sound. Note-taking is extremely important in ballet and dance in general, and just in life. Over the span of roughly 2 years, this is what I've done. This is my note taking. This was my first ever book, and at the end of this there will be an example of me in studio taking notes so that you can kind of get an idea as to how the process goes down in the moment. I'll read a couple of these in a moment just so that you can see the progression. My note taking in the beginning was very basic and not really well noted, and then in the end it got a lot more intense and then a lot more well formulated. So you gotta go through all of that with me, and hopefully this can serve as like a blueprint as to how you can take notes, how it can improve your ballet performance, and yeah. This was my first ever book, and I think it took me a full half year of using just this one book, and then in my second-ish half of a year I used 2 books, and then the next year I used 2 books. The reason why I used only 2 books in one whole year was because I was taking classes alone at home and then twice a week to 4 times a week in a studio, and there weren't really any corrections, so it was just myself and what I observed in myself, and by taking videos, and that's how I got to sharing my whole story. Was I wanted to kind of correct myself because I didn't have a teacher, so I would just video myself and go based off of that, which is, it's traumatizing. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, don't do that until you until you do. Anyways, so what I originally did was very basic things. So what I did in the beginning was I would write down the date. So this was the 12th of the 10th in 2020, and I would write down things I wanted to do in that class before the actual class. So this is another way to kind of hold yourself accountable every single day. So it's like miniature achievable goals that you know that you can do for that day, because then it just forces you to do them and check mark them off. I created actually a notebook, and I'll link it in the description, which you can download onto your phone, iPad, computer, or I guess you can have it printed as well, with all of these prompts so that you can just go ahead and fill them out and hold yourself accountable and improve. That's how you get results. Anyways, so this was an example. Clean chaînés. I had a huge problem with chaîné and I couldn't get them clean. Chaîné is, if you don't do ballet, it's just turning like this in a straight line with your feet together like this. So you're just turning like that, and it was a mess. Quick tempo, I was very slow. That's my own inner timing, is I'm just a very slow dancer. So I wanted to improve that, and to do accents. So to have accents like jeté, just have it in at the bar, same with tendu, so to make it more interesting. Hit the heel on the ground. This was something that I live by. I'm not a fan of people who don't put their heels on the ground when they jump, and I do that myself with some faster jumps. I don't think that it helps you with moving faster. If anything, you're just gonna get tendonitis or something happen to you. So hitting the heel on the ground, for example, I remember, because I wrote down all the combinations as well, which is also a huge thing that can help you, is I would have frappe. All frappe in Vaganova training is en releve. So I would do double to plie down or double to a straight leg down, and the heel, my teacher would make me hit it so that he could hear my heel hitting the ground. It had to be loud. He's like, I want to hear a big bang. And whenever I hear a teacher that says, oh, don't make noise when you're jumping, my teacher did the exact opposite. He's like, you need to make noise. This way I know your heels are touching the ground. And it went the same with jeté. Like, he needed to hear my foot hitting the ground, and this was to get out of the habit very quickly of lifting my heels off the ground. So it really depends on the person, but that's a good thing to do when you're older, I think, to just get out of that habit immediately. If you're younger, you don't need to be quite as extreme. Anyway, so that's something that you can do to improve with note taking, is to give yourself miniature goals every single day with the date and marking off whether or not you did them. If you didn't do them, you write it for the next day and you keep repeating it until you achieve them, and then you move on. This is my first ever page of writing corrections. First correction, these are very basic. 1 plie in pirouette. When I read that, I immediately know it means that when I go to fourth position, I don't plie, go up, plie, and you see this with a lot of dancers nowadays. They'll do like tombe, pas de bras to fourth, plie, and then they'll straighten and plie again to do the pirouette. I kind of was doing that hopping pirouette situation thing, and that's not good, because if you're doing a variation, you're just wasting time. So he would tell me that it's a waste of time. It's not a good way to prepare. You need just the one solid plie, and that's where fundamental basic technique is very important. You just need to be very well taught, so you don't need to do a bunch of plies. You just have the one, and that should prepare you enough. So that was one of the corrections. It was very short, very simple. As you can see, it's a mess on here, but that was one of them. Another one was sit in the heel, spine down in adagio. These are all just like very basic the way I wrote them, and I'll explain that later on in my example of me writing. Is you keep it very obvious. Like, even though this was 3 years ago, I know exactly what this means and when I was told this. Sit in the heel. I was doing an arabesque and I was in plie, and if my spine was not aligned with the heel that's in plie, I would be off balance. So sit in heel dash spine down in adagio meant my line of my spine had to go exactly in line with where my standing leg heel was in plie. So when you look at it geometrically, it's a perfect line, and then because of that supposedly perfect geometry, I should be in balance, and it should be a clean, neat position. So this is where I think, especially older, understanding ballet more theoretically in this sense is very helpful and can help you succeed a lot faster. Okay, this is another one, and I remember the exact day that I got this correction. I flipped over a few pages because it was very basic corrections, and that was over the span of like a whole month of these very basic corrections, because I spent a very long time just doing the same thing. And I think, and I've said this many times, at least in my TikToks, I think it's very important, especially with Russian training, how they teach is that you do the same one class for that whole week, so that you have the chance to not worry about remembering what the combination was, but to actually improve it. And then throughout the week, towards I think the half and the end of the week, they add on some more difficult things. Like if it was just a passe balance at some point, you add a pirouette there, you do stuff like that. So you make it a bit more difficult, but it's still essentially the same thing. Anyways, so this is another correction. It's a bit longer, and I remember exactly when I got this. For pirouette, the right hand brushes the air, left arm does force. No turbulence, one line. The teacher that I had, his English wasn't the best, so that's why like a lot of these I would just like quote him. So anytime that I read these, it's like his voice in my head saying it to me. So then I think that's also very important, is when a teacher tells you a correction in the moment, sometimes you can correct it, but then if you kind of go back and tell yourself with the correction, it doesn't quite happen the same way. Like you don't get the same results as when you're with the teacher. So I think it's important to write it exactly how you're told it, so that you can like relive that, if that makes any sense. Which in my case wasn't always the best situation, because I didn't have a great teacher. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this correction was, if I'm doing a pirouette to the right side, this arm would not have any force. It would just brush the air, like make a line of space, so that this arm with the force could come in and not have like this air in the way, causing it like turbulence, if that makes any sense. So this would make a straight line and open, and then this one would come in exactly where that line was. So that's another correction, and that ended up helping me. Now I don't do that quite as much because it kind of puts me off. So once again, it's very personal. When you get into the older levels of Vaganova, I think is the graduating year, they begin to tailor a bit more things to each person's body type and what looks best on them and what works best for them. So because I was having private lessons, and this was going to be like my only year to 2 years of training, everything was already very personalized. So there's a lot of things that I do that would not work for a lot of people. My fourth position is essentially from first position, tendu front and close. It's not crossed because my hips developed without me stretching them. So naturally, it's a bit harder for me to do these cross positions and allow for my knees to be aligned with my feet when I do plie. So I have a bit of a wider fourth position, which doesn't always help me. And now my attempt is to slowly edge it to a proper crossed over fourth position. Anyways, so yeah, I would write down all the combinations. Like this is rond de jambe, I would write the combination. And then the good thing, I think, if you have no idea what to write down when you're taking notes, write down the combination of the class, and then if the teacher told you a correction during that combination, you will remember it because you're thinking about the combination, what you were doing in the moment, what the teacher said after the combination, and that's why I think writing down the combination is a really good idea. So this goes on. There's a lot of very intricate, detailed, oriented notes in this one. In other ones, it gets a bit less detailed, and then in other ones, of course, it gets even more detailed. This was my latest one, and there were a lot of corrections, but it was mostly tailored to the combinations that I was doing. So that's kind of a basic run through. Yeah, it's just like very basic things. Always make sure to understand, even if the body does not, the mind must understand. So if you've never done it before, for example, that's the exact words he used. What it's saying essentially is if your body does not have that muscle memory, you need to understand what the combination is, what the correction is in your head, because if not, then you go and do it and then you either blank out or you could injure yourself even because you don't know what you're doing. So you always need to make sure that whatever you're going to go do before you do it, make sure you have it clear in your head, and that's a huge tip. So yeah, now you'll see me give an example in real time, and yeah, I hope this was helpful. Microphone is red because this is important information. So I'm at the ballet studio right now because I just finished 2.5 hours of class, but I have a rehearsal later, and I thought this is the perfect time to show a live demo of how I take my notes, because everything is right in my head right after class. So if you're going to take any form of notes, any form of note taking, you do it preferably if you're in your car, your parent is driving you home, you take the bus, train, whatever it is, or you're in the studio like I am right now. Right after class, you take the notes. So this is how you avoid getting the same corrections every single class, because you hate getting them, the teacher hates telling you the same thing, it's just a loop and it's boring and you don't progress. So what do? You write down that correction, and every single day you read it. Not once, but twice, at least twice. You read it before the class, and when you're at home getting ready to go to class, or if you're in the car, you read it like as if you would read a book. In place of reading a book, you're gonna read your notes now. I'm sorry, but you have to put all your other hobby reading things to the side, put that away, and you just get used to reading notes if you want to improve. We're going to start off with a basic run through of the class. I like to go in order because then you remember it a lot better, and it's also a good way to remember combinations if you have to repeat the combination the next day. So first combination was tendu facing the bar. That one's very basic, so I have that down. If you don't have it down, write down any corrections that you want to remember, such as aligning and winging your foot, and don't rolling, not doing tendu as if pretend that my hand is a foot from profile instead of doing this and then pointing the foot, going like this and staying, you know what I mean? So very basic things that you think you might register there all the time, they're not going to register. Write them down. Write them down. Write down absolutely everything. So I'm not going to bother with tendu facing the bar. Plie, I'm going to think of, okay, what did I not like today? I didn't like that I did plie, and when I was coming in, I crossed over my shoulder and elbow a bit too much. So I'm going to write that down. A key trick to not make this boring for reading is keeping it as short and simple as possible and very clear. Don't overcross arms in plie. Arms is just going to generalize everything, because I'm not going to write shoulder, because the shoulder then implies that the elbow and the whole arm is there. So just Don't overcross arms in plie, period. Next line. It's very simple, very basic like that. Next thing. The rest of the plies, there wasn't a problem. Back knee in fourth position, demi-plie and grand plie. So what did I write right now? Open both knees in plies from fourth. Plies just generalizes plies everywhere and everything. We had a grand plie in fourth position in the center. It applies to that. It applies to everything. As you can see so far, it's like nothing. It's very consistent, very concise. I think that was a wrong word. And it's very condensed. There we go. A correction that I've been getting for a week now has been to avoid droopy arms. So I'm gonna say it's great for your learning skills as well for when you go to school, because then you know how to write stuff a lot more condensed and very clear. So it's a 2-in-1. It's a many-in-one. Okay, so what I wrote right now is shape the arms and everything. I'm generalizing once again because droopy, if the hand is droopy, then this means that my arm isn't strong, which then means upper back, so that's generalizing everything. Shape the arms and everything, comma, specifically turns, because it was specifically turns where they start to flop a bit, meaning that my upper back isn't tight, and it means that my elbows aren't tight in holding the position, so it's very condensed, but the moment I read it, I know what I'm talking about. So you need to make it readable and understandable for you. You might know what you're writing in the moment, but then tomorrow or like a month from now, you write it and you read it and you're like, what did that mean? So you need to make it very clear, very condensed, and very obvious. And so I'm just going to continue doing this for a while until I get all the corrections written down throughout the class, generalizing everything. And then I'm just going to read it once more after I write them all down and just forget about it. And then tomorrow before class, I'm going to go ahead and read them all again and then repeat the cycle every single day. It is tedious. It is very, very tedious, but this is how you improve. And this can be applied to many things. It's not just ballet. It's not just ballet. It can be applied to many other sports. It can also be applied for your learning, for whatever it is. If you have to memorize something, this is a great way to memorize it. If you want to remember combinations, it's a great idea to write down combinations, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I just finished writing a 1.5 pages, and I'm not even halfway through anything. It is, like I said, very time consuming, very tedious, but it is very effective, especially if you have a correction that you keep getting constantly. And honestly, I improve a lot more by watching people dance, good people dance, and writing down corrections and reading them. So to me, ballet needs to be approached to improve faster theoretically as well, not only just physically doing it without any goal in mind, because to me that's like stupid hardworking without actually improving. So to me, this has been extremely effective in getting me to advance a lot faster. And you need to, the key thing is to write them down, but you also need to read them. So I used to read them every single day before class. Now I'm too busy though, so I write them down and I read them once a day and not twice a day. And then apart from that, I just envision myself dancing. That's a whole nother thing I'll get into at another point. But yeah, in my previous clip, I'm assuming, or at the beginning of this video, I will have shown my other books. I think I have 5 books in total. All of them are very similar, so that it keeps me, I don't know, that's OCD of me, I don't know. Anyways, I have a special pen that I use, and yeah, I guess I would have shown you what my other notebooks looked like. You improve with taking notes over time. Don't stress that, oh my god, I'm writing 5 pages. I'm writing 5 pages, and you're like, half a page doesn't seem like a lot. It takes time. When I began to take notes, and you would have noticed this at the beginning of the video, I wrote like a half a page, and then over time it was like 10 pages a day, and then I would reduce it to 5. It really depended on what the correction was that day, what the teacher's mood was in that day, if they were giving me the same corrections or not, if I improved on them, if it was new corrections. Yeah, I honestly think this is a great way to improve, because once you finally get over that hurdle of not getting the same corrections all the time, you can move on to new corrections, and then that's improvement and it's consistency because you're reading the corrections every single day and thinking about them and applying those corrections every single day. You're being consistent and you're moving ahead. So I hope this was helpful. Obviously, I'll get into some other things that help me. This isn't everything. You do have to also physically be able to do a lot of stuff, but this has been at least 50% of the work has been the note-taking, so highly recommend doing it. Once again, not only for ballet, but for a lot of things. Anyways, so thank you for watching. I hope I don't look too dead tired. I have another 2 hours, I think, before something happens. Anyways, yeah, so thanks for watching. Let me know if you found this useful, and yeah.